"You're not my real dad." Those words would come later, cutting, unforgettable. But even before they were ever spoken aloud, I sometimes felt them, hovering in the silence of the house I had paid for, echoing behind the polite smiles, hidden inside the casual dismissals. Still, I pushed those doubts down, buried them beneath years of work and sacrifice, because I told myself that building a family was worth every cost. I'm 44 now, and for nearly 9 years I thought of myself as a father to Emily's children, Maya and Connor. Their biological dad lived 2 states away. He was little more than a shadow stretched across their childhood, remembered only on holidays when a box would arrive in the mail or when his number flashed on their phones for a brief, awkward call. He was the man they claimed as dad, though he was absent from every real struggle, every sleepless night, every moment that tested what parenthood actually meant. He got to keep the title. I was left to do the labor. I was the one who showed up. When Maya needed someone to take her to the emergency room after falling off her bike, it was me who sat beside her for hours, filling out the forms while Emily stayed home with Connor. When Connor developed that chronic cough one winter, I was the one who drove from pharmacy to pharmacy at midnight, searching for the medication that was suddenly out of stock everywhere. When the school called because one of them forgot their lunch or got into trouble, it was my phone that rang, not their father's. I was their anchor, their provider, their steady hand. But never, in their eyes, their father. I never tried to replace him. I want to make that clear. I never forced them to call me Dad. Never erased their father from conversation. Never pretended he didn't exist. I only wanted to be the one thing he never was: present, real, constant. I met Emily at a friend's party years back. She was glowing that night, confident and charming, the kind of woman who could command a room without trying. I was tired of drifting, tired of half-hearted relationships that led nowhere, and when she smiled at me, it felt like someone had finally seen me. Within a year we were living together, and a year and a half later I signed the papers for a modest house in Cleveland. I remember the pen trembling in my hand, not from doubt, but from a strange, powerful certainty. I was choosing permanence. I was choosing family. The house was mine by purchase, but ours by choice. I put both our names on the deed, though Emily contributed little at the time. She was working part-time, struggling with bills and the aftermath of her divorce, and I told myself it didn't matter. Money was just paper. Family was the investment that lasted. I poured myself into that belief. Every dollar I earned, every weekend I spent repairing faucets or fixing roofs, every plan I made for the future revolved around the idea that we were building something permanent. I told myself I wasn't just maintaining a house. I was building a home. I bought Maya her first real camera when she decided photography wasn't just a hobby but a calling. I drove her to classes, looked through her endless sh*ts of abandoned buildings and blurry sunsets, told her she had an eye for beauty even when I wasn't sure I saw it. I wanted her to feel encouraged, wanted her to know someone believed in her even if her biological father never looked her way. With Connor, it was different. He had inherited a rusted-out car from Emily's uncle, barely running, coughing smoke every time he turned the key. I ordered the parts one by one, spread them across the garage, and showed him how to use his hands to give something broken another chance at life. We spent nights covered in grease, and though he didn't talk much, I felt those hours were our bond, quiet, wordless, but real. I told myself that one day, when he drove that car down the road, he would remember who had made it possible. I thought those gestures mattered. I thought they were seeds that would grow into respect, loyalty, maybe even love. But seeds don't grow in stone. I worked long hours, sometimes double shifts, sometimes contracts on weekends, because Emily's paycheck couldn't carry much. I told myself I didn't mind. When bills came due, I was the one who paid. When vacations were planned, I booked the hotels, bought the tickets, packed the car. Their lives, their opportunities, their comforts, they all flowed quietly from me. And because I believed that's what fathers did, I never kept score. But still, there were moments when the cracks showed. Times when Connor would mention his real dad with a kind of pride, as if a man's worth were measured by blood alone. Times when Maya would receive a birthday card from him and beam, though it was just a generic signature beneath pre-printed words. Times when Emily would defend their distance, saying, "He's trying in his own way." Trying? I thought. What about me? Wasn't I trying every day? But I swallowed those thoughts because to voice them felt selfish. I told myself love meant enduring in silence, giving without demand, waiting patiently for recognition that might never come. I told myself they would see me eventually, that children grow, that perspective changes, that one day they would look back and realize who had carried them. Years slipped by in that hope. I watched Connor grow tall, his voice deepen, his shoulders broaden. I watched Maya take her first portraits that actually looked professional. I watched Emily smile with relief when the mortgage was paid, when groceries were stocked, when life seemed steady again. And through it all, I told myself this was my family, that titles didn't matter, that one day, my place here would be undeniable. But love, when it is one-sided, turns into servitude. And respect, when it never arrives, becomes a wound that never heals. Looking back now, I can see it, the signs were always there. The subtle dismissals, the way Emily's kids never truly called me theirs. The way their father's ghost was still given more reverence than the man sitting at their table every day. I was building a house of glass, and I mistook it for stone. I had given them everything: money, time, care, presence. And I believed that was enough. I believed that when you love, you don't keep score. But the truth I would learn too late is that some people are counting even when you are not. Some people are keeping tally of what you are not, of who you are not, and no matter how much you give, they will weigh it against the one thing you can never provide: their father's blood. And when the time came, when the words were finally spoken, all my years of sacrifice collapsed into a single truth: I was never theirs. Not really. Family dinners were always uncomfortable, but I endured them. Emily loved to gather her relatives around our long oak table, piling it with food I paid for, wine I bought, and silverware I had polished by hand. It was supposed to be a picture of togetherness. To her, maybe it was. To me, it was theater. Smiles that never reached the eyes, polite questions that skimmed the surface, laughter that carried no weight. That night, I can still see it as if the room is frozen in amber. Emily's sister telling a story about her new promotion, her father carving the roast, the kids scattered around with the restless energy of young adults who had rather been anywhere else. The smell of garlic butter clung to the air, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was family, that my years of labor had led to this fragile harmony. And then Maya raised her glass. She was 19 by then, full of arrogance that only comes with youth and the illusion of independence. Her hair fell over one eye, and she smirked as though she knew something the rest of us didn't. She lifted her wine and, with a voice loud enough to cut through the room, said, "A toast to our dad imitator." Laughter scattered around the table like glass breaking. Some chuckled nervously, unsure if it was a joke. Others stared into their plates, unwilling to meet my eyes. But I looked at her, really looked, and saw no hint of humor, only cruelty. And then she added, sharper, crueler, sealing the wound, "His role is to stay quiet and just pay." The room went still. Forks hovered above plates. Even the children at the far end stopped whispering. There are silences that heal, and silences that k*ll. This was the latter. I didn't shout. I didn't slam my fists. Anger would have given her power. Instead, I set my fork down slowly, the sound of metal against porcelain echoing louder than her words. I lifted my own glass, held it steady, and spoke clearly enough that every soul at that table would remember. "To myself," I said, "the one who keeps this family standing." And then I drank. Not to her, not to them, to me. When I placed the glass back on the table, I didn't wait for Emily's excuses, or for Maya's mocking grin to fade. I stood, pulled my chair back, and walked away from the meal I had paid for. The looks on their faces, the shock, the shame, the recognition, were worth more than any argument. They all knew. They had always known who carried the weight here. They just never said it aloud until Maya turned my sacrifices into a joke. That night, when the house quieted and Emily tried to explain it away as teenage attitude, I felt something harden in me. Maya was 19, an adult, not a child. She knew exactly what she was doing. And in mocking me, she revealed the truth she and Connor had carried for years but never dared speak. To them, I was not a father. I was a wallet, placeholder, a fool. So I made a decision. From that night on, every bill that had once passed through my hands for Maya stopped cold. No more tuition covered by me. No more gas money slipped quietly into her account. No more trips. No more shopping. No more emergencies that drained my card while she laughed behind my back. It was almost surgical the way I severed the ties. Quiet, deliberate, one payment at a time. When the tuition office called, I told them to send the bill to her real father. When she texted for gas money, I replied with silence. When she begged Emily, I let Emily scramble, let her understand the price of silence, the cost of complicity. The shift was immediate. Maya tried to brush it off at first, calling me petty, saying she was only joking. But when the gas tank emptied and the card declined, when the tuition reminder came with late fees attached, the laughter turned to panic. And Connor? He said nothing, but his silence was a knife of its own. He had been there at that table. He had heard the toast. He had seen me walk away, and he chose to say nothing. No defense, no protest, no whisper that Maya was wrong. His quiet made him guilty too. Emily tried to mediate, tried to smooth the edges, but she never raised her voice to Maya. Not once. Instead, she came to me with pleas, with excuses. She didn't mean it. She's young. She'll grow out of it. But I saw the truth. She didn't defend me because she knew Maya meant every word. And worse, because deep down, part of her agreed. So I cut deeper. I moved my money into a separate account, one Emily couldn't touch. I tracked every automatic payment that had been silently draining me for years and shut them down one by one. The cell phone plans, the subscriptions, the little luxuries that made their lives easier, all gone. If I was only good for money, then they could learn to live without mine. First, there was confusion, then frustration, then fury. But through it all, I felt a strange, quiet calm. For years I had given and given, hoping that love would sprout from the soil of sacrifice. But love never came. Only entitlement, only scorn. That night at the dinner table was the unveiling, the moment the masks fell. And when they did, I realized that I had been building a house on rotten foundations. My labor, my money, my devotion. It had all been fuel for people who saw me as nothing more than a temporary fixture. A man to be tolerated until the real father appeared with his hollow gifts and empty charm. So I decided, if I was a wallet to them, then I would close. If my role was to stay quiet and just pay, then I would choose silence without payment. And in that silence, I finally began to hear myself again. Emily tried to excuse Maya the night after the dinner. She sat across from me in the living room, her voice low, soft, almost rehearsed. "She's just a teenager," she said. "You know how they are, sarcasm, testing boundaries. Don't take it so personally." But Maya wasn't 13 anymore. She was 19. Legally an adult, capable of voting, capable of choosing her words with precision. She knew exactly what she was doing when she called me a dad imitator. She knew it when she laughed and told me my role was to stay quiet and just pay. She wasn't a child lashing out. She was a young woman pulling off the mask of politeness she had worn for years, finally showing me what she truly thought of me. And Connor. Sweet, quiet Connor. His silence that night had cut me even deeper than Maya's words. He sat there, watching, listening, saying nothing while I was mocked at my own table. His silence wasn't neutrality. It was complicity. It was agreement wrapped in cowardice. That was when something broke inside me. Something final. I packed a bag. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in cold, deliberate silence. I moved my money into a private account, untouchable. I logged into online banking and began cutting every cord that tied me financially to their lives. The phone bills, gone. The credit cards in Emily's name but tied to my account, closed. Automatic payments for Maya's tuition, canceled. Connor's car insurance, stopped. By the end of that week, I was no longer their safety net. I rented a small apartment in Toledo, bare walls and a thin mattress on the floor. The first night there, I sat in silence and listened to the emptiness. No photos of kids on the fridge. No clutter of backpacks and shoes by the door. No shouts from upstairs asking for rides or money. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. But the world I had walked out of wasn't finished with me yet. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. "Hey, I was just joking that night. You know that, right? Don't take it so seriously." I stared at the screen, at the words typed so casually, as if all she had done was step on my foot, not spit on nearly a decade of sacrifice. I didn't reply, because the truth was simple. A joke is only funny if both people laugh. I hadn't laughed. A few days after that, Connor came by the apartment. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," he said, his voice low. "I mean, I thought you'd be upset for a while, but I didn't think you'd just go." I looked him in the eye and asked, "If I had died last year, what would you have called me at the funeral?" His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at the floor, unable to answer. That silence was all the answer I needed. Emily's call came next. Not with softness this time, not with excuses, but with accusation. "You're breaking this family," she said, her voice sharp, brittle. "You're abandoning them when they need you most. All because of one stupid comment. How can you throw everything away so easily?" I almost laughed at the word abandoning, as if I hadn't been the one picking up the pieces of their lives for nearly a decade. As if I hadn't been the one carrying them while their biological father sent nothing but hollow words through a phone line. But I didn't laugh. I only told her the truth. "I didn't break this family, Emily. Your children did. You stood there and let them. You let them mock me, reduce me to a paycheck, erase me from their lives while I was sitting right beside them. And you did nothing. Don't call it abandonment when the only thing I left was a prison built out of your silence." She hung up on me. Days passed, then weeks. And in that space, the consequences began to take shape. Bills that had once been quietly covered by me started arriving in their mailboxes. Connor's insurance company called, demanding payment. Maya's school sent letters about overdue tuition. Gas tanks stayed empty, trips stayed canceled. Little luxuries vanished one by one. At first, they tried to spin it into defiance. Maya posted online about how she was finally independent, how she didn't need anyone's help. But independence tastes different when it comes with late fees and empty wallets. Within weeks, her pride turned into desperation. Connor, quieter than his sister, began asking Emily for money. But Emily couldn't cover everything. Her paycheck was thin, her debts heavy, and she had always leaned on me to keep the roof above their heads steady. Now she had to face what life looked like without my shoulders to bear the weight. I heard from a mutual friend that Maya had even reached out to her biological father. He promised to see what he could do. But the man had no history of following through. He was good for words, sometimes gifts, but never responsibility. And still, Maya looked to him with hope, as if his blood was worth more than my years of labor. I didn't reach out. I didn't offer a hand. I let them sit in the lives they had built, the lives where I was nothing more than an imitator, a stand-in, a man to be tolerated until he opened his wallet. The silence from their side grew heavier with each passing day. And with every silent night in my new apartment, I felt my resolve sharpen. Because here is the truth no one wants to admit. Love cannot be begged into existence. Respect cannot be purchased with sacrifice. And when someone shows you what you mean to them, you either accept it or destroy yourself fighting it. That night at the dinner table, Maya tore away the mask. Connor let it happen. Emily excused it. And I finally saw my reflection for what it was. Not a father, not a partner, not a man to be valued. Just a wallet. Just an imitator. So I walked away, and I never looked back. The divorce went through faster than I expected. For years, I had believed leaving Emily would be complicated, messy, a knot too tangled to ever untie. But in the end, it was almost surgical. Papers signed, property divided, names erased from accounts. Legally simple, emotionally brutal. When the judge's gavel came down, I didn't feel triumph. I felt empty, like someone had carved out a decade of my life and left a hollow space where a family used to be. And yet, beneath that hollow ache, there was something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. I moved back to my small apartment in Toledo. Sparse, plain, but mine. The silence there was absolute. No footsteps stomping upstairs, no slammed doors, no late-night demands for money, no arguments whispered behind my back. Just stillness. For the first time in almost 9 years, the fridge door didn't have photos of kids who weren't mine. No sticky notes reminding me of dance recitals or soccer games. No grocery lists scribbled in Emily's handwriting, waiting for me to fulfill. The walls were bare, the rooms were empty, and yet, it felt like freedom. I realized something in that silence. You don't stay where you're merely tolerated. You go where you're valued. And in that apartment, though lonely, I felt valued by the one person I had ignored all these years, myself. Of course, they didn't accept it quietly. Emily called, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. One night, she accused me of destroying the family. Another time, her voice cracked with desperation. They need you. You raised them. You can't just cut them off like they're strangers. But that was the point. They had always treated me like a stranger. Strangers don't get called dad imitators. Strangers don't get laughed at over dinner while their years of sacrifice are reduced to a punchline. Strangers don't get tolerated only when they're paying. And so I told her the truth. I already was a stranger in that house. I just finally left. Connor came by once more before the divorce was finalized. He looked thinner, older, weighed down by something heavier than his years. He didn't speak at first, just stood there in my doorway with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't think you'd go through with it. I thought you'd always be there." I asked him the same question I had asked before. "If I had died last year, what would you have called me?" Again, silence. His eyes dropped to the floor, his lips pressed tight. And in that silence, I knew he still hadn't found an answer. Maya never came. She sent a few texts, half apologies, half demands, but they all read the same. "I didn't mean it. You're overreacting. It was just a joke." Not once did she say the one word that would have mattered: respect. And their father, the man they glorified, defended, elevated over me, he never stepped up. He never filled the void I left. He remained exactly what he had always been, a ghost with a phone line. And yet, in their hearts, he was still the real dad. So let him have the title. Titles mean nothing when the hands behind them are empty. As weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life. Slowly, methodically. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made coffee for one, sat by the window, and listened to the quiet. I went for long drives without anyone calling to demand where I was or when I'd be home. I worked, I saved, I lived. Not for them anymore, for me. Sometimes, when the nights were too quiet, I thought about what could have been. About the family I had tried to build. About the years I had poured into children who would never call me theirs. Regret comes in waves, heavy and suffocating. But then I remember the truth. Love without respect is not love at all. It is slavery. And I had been a slave long enough. I know some people would call me cruel. They would say I should have forgiven Maya, that I should have endured Connor's silence, that I should have overlooked Emily's complicity. They would argue that family means sacrifice, that parenthood means unconditional love. But I ask, what kind of family mocks the hand that feeds it? What kind of children look a man in the eye, the man who carried them for nearly a decade, and call him an imitator, a wallet, a joke? What kind of wife stands silent while her children spit on her husband's sacrifices? No, family is not blood. Family is respect. Family is gratitude. Family is standing beside the man who carries you, not laughing at him when he finally stumbles. So now I live alone. And in that solitude, I have found something better than tolerance. Peace. If anyone ever again dares to call me a dad imitator or a temporary fixture, I won't argue. I won't explain myself. I will simply do what I should have done years ago. Smile, pack my things, and walk away, without regret. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to let go of the people who never saw it in the first place. And now I ask you, the strangers who will hear my story, the ones unclouded by blood or guilt, was I wrong? Was I heartless to cut ties, to walk away, to protect what little of myself remained? Or was it the only choice left for a man who gave everything and was repaid with nothing but contempt? Tell me, if you had been in my place, would you have endured it?